All right, I wanted to review quickly exponents. So we're going to talk about exponents. So positive exponents, right? 3 to the second power is the same as 3 times 3. If an exponent is negative, we've talked about that, or if an exponent is 0. So 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5. 5 times 1, right? And then 5 to the 0 power. 5 to the negative 1. 5 to the negative 2. So you see we keep going down here, right? Divide each by 5, right? Divide 5 by 5. That gives you 1. Right? And then continue. You get 1/5, right? So 5 to the negative first power is 1 over 5. 5 to the negative 2 power is 1 over 25. That's your base, and that's your exponent. All right, any 0 exponent equals 1. And any negative exponent is going to be that exponent as the denominator with 1 as the numerator. So non-zero number, right? You can't have 0 to a negative exponent because that would have you dividing by 0, which you cannot do. So 2 to the negative 4 is read 2 to the negative 4th power. 1 cup is 2 to the negative 4th power gallons. You're going to simplify that expression by taking your 2 to the 4th and putting it as your denominator. Simplify it. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 16. 1 divided by 16. All right. Sandfly, obviously very tiny. They have a wingspan up to 5 to the negative 3rd power meters. Simplify that in the same way. Just take your 5 to the 3rd power and put it as your denominator, and then simplify it. 1/125th of a meter, right? So do these. All right, so same thing. 1 over 4 to the 3rd. 4 times 4 times 4 is 1 over 64. Anything to a 0 power is 1. Now these are, be careful with these, right? So this is negative 5 to the negative 4th power. So it's the whole negative 5 because it's in parentheses. It's negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. Since you have an even number of negatives, it's going to end up being a positive. Without the parentheses, it is 1 over negative 5 to the 4th, but you do 5 to the 4th and then add the negative in. The negative is not involved because it's not in the parentheses. And that can be tricky. So you get a negative number here, you get a positive number here. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. See? Negative 3 in parentheses to the negative 4th, the base is negative, but in negative 3 not in parentheses, the base is positive. It's just the 3. Same thing. Try these out. All right, this is what you should have on your paper. In parentheses, in parentheses. And this time, so here you had an even number of multiplication, so you get a positive. Here you have an odd number. So these two together are positive, these two together are positive, and then you have a negative. So you end up with a negative number. And this again, once again, your base is positive because it's not in parentheses. And you end up 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And then it's all negative because the negative comes in after. Now we'll check out the multiplication division properties. All right, so if you multiply exponents with the same base, you're just going to add their exponents with the same base, right? Because it just looks like 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So you really just have 3 7 times. So you're just going to add your exponents, right? Product of two powers, right? With the same base, right? It's just the sum of the exponents. Just the sum of the exponents, right? So here we're just looking at, got the same base, add your exponents, add your powers. Here we're simplifying. This is a little more algebraic, right? Because you have to group the ones with the same base. And notice the negative exponent. So you're going to have to make that 2 squared as the denominator, right? And once you simplify it, you'll get that, right? 4 minus 2 is 2, and 4 plus 2 is 6. Same thing here, right? You've got, you're just going to group your like terms, right? Your q's are the same. So you're going to add 3 and 6, q to the 9th times r squared, right? Because you don't have anything to group with r. Here, everything's in n, right? Group 3 and 1. Get 4. And then n to the 4. So 4 minus 4 is 0, right? And then anything to the 0 power is 1. Because anything written without an exponent is just to the first power. All right, same thing here. Give it a try. See what you come up with. All right, this is what you got. Now group these terms here. The base 3 go together and the base 5 go together. Negative 3, right? And so you're just adding the exponents for the same base. Negative 3 plus 4 gives you 3 to the first power, which is just 3. And then times 5, and the 8 plus 2 is to 10. Try this one as well. Same base go together. Add your exponents, right? In this case, since this one has a negative exponent, to simplify it fully, you have to get that on the bottom. Simplify this one. Try it on your own. Pause it and then come back. There we go. So you've got your positive, right? Positives on top, negatives on the bottom. Drop down all your negatives because we're dealing with variables and not real numbers. You drop your variable, drop it down like this. X to the first times 1 is just 1. Because this cancels out, right? And then 1 divided by x to the third times x to the fourth. You add the 3 and the 4, and you get 1 over x to the 7th. All right, so we're going to do one little word problem. Light from the sun travels at about 1.86 times 10 to the 5th miles per second. It takes about 15,000 seconds for the light to reach Neptune. Find the approximate distance between the sun and Neptune. 1.86 times 10 to the 5th times 15,000, right? We got to write 15,000 in scientific notation. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1.86 times 10 to the 5th times 1.5 times 10 to the 4th. Multiply these, right? And then multiply your exponents, right? Because it's just all this together, all this together. So you're grouping your terms because it's all on the same side of the equal sign, and they're all numbers. There's no variables. So you can group your terms. You get 2.79. And then when you multiply 10 to the 5th times 10 to the 4th, you get 10 to the 5th plus 4, and you get 10 to the 9th. Now, if you remember, when you have a power or an exponent in parentheses to another exponent, you multiply the exponents. So if it's just this times this, you add them. But if it is in parentheses with another exponent, you're going to multiply, right? Because 4 to the 3rd squared, because it's the whole term, is just 4.4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. So basically, you are multiplying your exponents, right? So here's that same thing, right? Just multiplying, because it's in parentheses, you multiply those exponents. So here we're going to have 2 times 4 equals 8. And then here we have 3 times 0 is 0. And 4 to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is 1. So make sure you simplify that all the way. And you can do that. So we have to simplify your parentheses first, right? So this is multiple steps here. Simplify your parentheses first. 3 times -5 gives us x to the -15th. And then we have x to the -15th times x to the 4th, which means since we are multiplying same base, we're going to use addition. -15 plus 4 is -11, x to the -11 power. You always want to have a positive exponent, so you have to do 1 over x to the 11th. All right. Simplify this. Pause it, simplify it, come back. Remember all the things you know. All right. Since we have this term in parentheses, we're going to multiply our exponents. 3 to the 20th power, right? 0 times 3 is 0. Anything to the 0 power is 1. All right. Try this one, pause it, solve this one, and then come back. And remember, do all of this, and then all of this, and then multiply. All right, we're back. So we'll do our parentheses first. So a to the 3rd power, that whole term raised to the 4th power is a to the 3rd times the 4th power. Same thing here. This whole term raised to the -3 power. You're going to multiply your exponents. 3 times 4 is 12. -2 times -3. A negative times a negative is +6. And now we just have it set up like this. We are adding, because we have two exponents with the same base. So we're going to add those exponents, and we get a to the 18th power. The only other little caveat is if you have an exponent with a coefficient, you just split them up, right? Because it's the whole thing. 8x times 8x times 8x is the same as 8 times 8 times 8 times x times x times x, which is 8 to the third times x to the third. And then you can simplify the 8 to the third, which is 512. So when you have a coefficient, you just separate everything and do it like that. So 8x to the third is the same as 8 to the third times x to the third. So we're going to do that here, right? And remember, if the negative sign is outside of the parentheses, you add the negative sign after you do what's inside the parentheses to the exponent. So 2y to the second power is the same as 2 to the second power times y to the second power. Which is 4 times y to the second power. So you get 4y squared, and then you add your negative sign after. Now this time the negative sign is within the parentheses. So basically this simplifies to -2 to the third power times y to the third power. -2 to the third power is -8 times y to the third. All right, and the distributive property still works. Right, distribute that square to both of these terms. So x to the 6th, that whole term to the second power, times y to the -3rd, that whole term to the second power. Continue to use the power of product property. 6 times 2 is 12. -3 times 2, a negative times a positive is a negative. Remember, when you simplify the best you can, you need a negative, you need all positive exponents. So you drop that y down. And you get x to the 12th divided by y to the 6th. All right, we'll try a couple of more of those. Couple of more. So this is going to be power of product, right? 4 to the third times p to the third. Simplify that 4 to the third. 64p to the third. Once again, notice the negative sign is inside the parentheses. So this is going to be -5 squared times t squared squared, right? Make sure you write everything out so you realize what you're doing. -5 squared is 25. And here, you have to use power of product property. T squared, that whole term squared, means you multiply those terms. 25t to the 4th. Now, along the same lines as multiplication is division. It's the same thing. So in this case, when you have 3 to the 5th divided by 3 to the 3rd, because you're dividing, you are going to end up subtracting. Because if you write them out like this fully, 3 to the 5th is the same as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, divided by 3 to the 3rd is the same as 3 times 3 times 3. 3 of those 3's cancel out, so you end up with just the 2 3's left. And what you've really done is subtracted. So it's the same thing as multiplication. When you multiply property, that is addition. And when you, the division property is subtraction. So same thing as we were doing before. only it's division, so we're subtracting, but it has to be the same base. So here we're going to have 7 minus 2, 2 to the 5th, that's going to equal 32. Here we have 4 minus 3, which is x to the first, which is just the same as x. All right, so here we're using some of the things we learned before. And so we're going to do a lot, but we want to remember to keep it straight on our paper. We have to do our parentheses first. dE, that whole term squared, is the same as d squared e squared, right? And then we can do our subtraction. So this is d to the 4th minus the 2nd, and e to the 3rd minus the 2nd. D squared times, right? Make sure you know that that's times. E to the 1st, e to the 1st is the same as e, so it's d squared e. And over here, we're also doing our subtraction, right? 3 to the 1, right? 1 minus 2, 4, you have to keep the bases together, times 4 to the 3 minus 4, times 5 to the 5 minus 3. So we get 3 to the negative 1st, 4 to the negative 1st, and 5 to the positive square, right? We are going to make sure that our exponents are positive. So we bring those down, and now we simplify. So either way can be considered simplified, right? You don't always have to multiply it out. All right, continuing along the same path. Try these on your own and then come back. All right, here we go. 9 minus 7, 2 squared equals 4. Here we have 1 minus 4. It's negative 3, so we have to drop it down. 1 over y to the 3rd because you want your exponents positive. Try these on your own and then come back for the solution. All right, here we go. You have your parentheses first, right? And when you have this whole term to the 2nd power, means you multiply. So you get 5 times 2, so you get m to the 10th times n. Now you do your division or subtracting your exponents. 5 minus 10, because it has to be the same base. 4 minus 1, because anything that is by itself that doesn't have an exponent is to the 1st power. M to the negative 5 times n to the 3rd. And we want this positive, so we're going to drop it down. Over here, and collect our terms, right? Everything with the same base. So we get 3 to the 5 minus 4, 2 to the 4 minus 2, and 4 to the 3 minus 6. 5 minus 4 is 1, so that's just 3. 4 minus 2 is 2, and then 3 minus 6 is negative 3. We want a positive exponent. 3 times 4. We've brought that 4 to the 3rd down to make it positive. 12 over 64. Simplify that to 3 over 16. All right, so as we did before, we're dividing here before we were multiplying, but because we have a number with no variable and an exponent with the same base, we can split them up, right? 3.3 times 10 to the 6th divided by 3 times 10 to the 8th. We're going to do the operations individually and then multiply. 3.3 divided by 3 is 1.1. 10 to the 6 divided by 10 to the 8 is 10 to the 6th minus 8. 1.1 times 10 to the negative 2. We can continue to simplify by writing 1.1 times 10 squared, right? 1.1 is 11 times 10 to the 1. Bada bing, bada boom. Here we go, right? You also could just write this out as 1.1 times 10 to the negative 2, 1, 2, and that would have been the same as 11 times 10 to the negative third. All right, we're going to do one word problem, and then we'll move on to some more scientific notation. Well, this is scientific notation. The Colorado Department of Education spent about $4.408 times 10 to the $9 in fiscal year 2004-2005 on public schools. There were about 7.6 times 10 to the 5th students. What's your average spending per student? Right? Total spending divided by total students is our average. And so you see, once we set it up, we have the same thing we had before. Bada bing, bada boom, right? So we do them separately. So 4.408 divided by 7.6 is 0.58. And then you have your 10 to the 9 minus 5 gives you 0.58 times 10 to the 4th. And you can write it in standard form because you want to know the average spending for students. So you need an actual whole number. So it's $5,800 per student. Much like we did with multiplication, if you have a fraction and it is to a power, an exponent, then you write it, you distribute the exponent to each part of that fraction. So 2/3, that whole thing in parentheses to the third power is the same as 2 to the third divided by 3 to the third. Same thing here. So we're just going to distribute that power to both parts, the numerator and the denominator. And then we can simplify. Works the same way here. We have to distribute it to each term, right? 3d squared to the 4th, EF to the 4th. And then we have to distribute it 4 to the 3, 4 to the d squared, 4 to the e, and 4 to the f, right? And then we also have to continue the power of a power property. So this whole term, d squared to the 4th power, is d 2 times 4 equals d to the 8th. Simplify. 3 to the 4th is 81, d to the 8th, e to the 4th, f to the 4th. Do one more of those. Just take it step by step because there's a lot going on, but you know how to do all of it. Take it step by step. Do it one thing at a time, and that way you won't get lost. First, power of a power, right? So this whole term, 2x cubed to the 3rd, is to the 2nd power, and this whole term is also to the 2nd power. Power of a power property. 2 goes to 2, 2 squared, and then this whole term x cubed is squared, and then the whole term, right, x cubed, y cubed, that whole term is squared. Then we are going to, once again, step by step, do your inside parentheses first, like we did, x cubed to y cubed, and then power of a power property, distribute the two. That's what we're going to do next. So up top, right, what do? We had 2 squared, x cubed, that whole term squared, and then we have this whole term, right? We converted xy to the third to x to the third, y to the third. That whole term is now the second power, right? Just take it step by step. Power of power again, right? So 2 squared, it's not in parentheses, it stays by itself. And then you got x cubed to the second power, right? So go ahead and simplify 2 squared to 4, and then x, power of a power property. X cubed to the second power is the same as x to the 3 times 2 power. And then down here, same thing. Power of a power. X cubed to the second power is x to the 3 times 2 power. Y cubed to the second power is y to the 3 times 2 power. Right? And then continue. We get 4x to the 6th over x to the 6th, y to the 6th. And if you weren't paying close attention, you would have missed this. X to the 6th divided by x to the 6th cancels out, and it gives us 4 over y to the 6th. It was a lot, but if we took it step by step, then we can do it. Just take it step by step. Don't try to rush and don't get ahead of yourself. All right, this is the last one we're going to do. Try this one on your own. Try this one on your own. All right, here we go. Power of a quotient property, right? So we have distribute this to each piece. 2 to the third, that whole term squared is 2 to the 3 times 2. 3 squared, that whole term squared is 3 to the 2 times 2. And then continue to simplify. 2 to the 3 times 2 is 2 to the 6th. 3 to the 2 times 2 is 3 to the 4th. Get your number and then simplify. All right. And that is that.